The following documentary will be about the controversial topic of animal testing and whether or not it is more beneficial to biology than harmful to the animals it is tested on. This documentary will also cover the cons and pros of animal testing and an exclusive interview with Dr. Michelle Haney. Animal experimentation is the use of non-human animals in experiments. They are usually used to advance medications and/or scientific research. They are also used for determining the safety of substances such as food or drugs. The FDA requires drugs and medications to be tested on animals before it hits the shelves. Also, if it is tested on animals and then humans, the pricing goes down by a lot, which means more sales. There are many different types of animals used, and each are used for different reasons. For example, mice and rats are used because of their genetic, biological, and behavioral characteristics that closely resemble humans. Many human diseases can be replicated in mice and rats. The benefits of using mice are the fact that they reproduce quickly, have relatively short lifespans, and in order to become lab rats, they must be inbred so that the medical trials are almost identical genetically. They are naturally born without immune systems and can serve as models for normal and malignant human tissue research. Chimps are used for testing reactions to drug dosing and addiction. Drugs include nicotine, cocaine, morphine, and marijuana. They are given varying doses while being tested on key pressing in response to food rewards. They are also used to grow vaccines for viruses that are difficult to grow in culture medium. For example, hepatitis B virus. Baboons are used to see how they react to things like stress. Their thought processes and stress hormones are very similar to ours. Rabbits are used for cosmetics and drug toxicity. Birds are used because our brain wiring is similar. They are used in biomedical research, sclerosis and fibrosis, diet and nutritional, visual impairment, sex change, trans-species brain transplants, aging and pain experiments, chemical, toxicological, virus detection, smoke inhalation, drug testing experiments.
It's the summer of 1950, and everyone is eager to escape from their classes in Wytheville, Virginia. With the hot summer days ahead, the best place to be is at the pool with all your friends. But suddenly, horror strikes. Movie theaters are shut down, baseball games were canceled, and panicking parents kept their kids indoors, anything to keep them safe from an invisible invader. Outsiders sped through town with their windows rolled up and bandanas covering their faces. The ones who couldn't escape the perpetrator were left paralyzed, and some died in the wake of the devastating and contagious virus. Polio had struck in Wytheville. The town was in the midst of a full-blown epidemic. That year alone, more than 33,000 Americans fell victim, half of them under the age of 10. Polio is a viral disease that can affect nerves and can lead to partial or full paralysis, which means a complete loss of muscle function. It can be brought on very suddenly by direct person-to-person contact or contact with infected nasal or oral bodily fluid. Young adults and children would often be confined to the dreaded iron lung, a form of medical ventilator that enables a person to breathe when normal muscle control has been lost or the work of breathing exceeds the person's ability. These cruel traps left many children captive for months with no escape. You couldn't move, you couldn't look around, you couldn't do anything but wait for a cure. So how does this relate to animal testing? With funding from the March of Dimes campaign, Dr. Jonas Salk set out to create a vaccination from the dreaded polio epidemic that was striking the American nation, alongside his biggest asset, the monkey. Monkeys were used in polio vaccine creation to test the effectiveness of the vaccine. Salk administered his test trials of his vaccine in monkeys and was able to come to the conclusion that it was, in his own words, safe, effective, and potent. This testing alone saved countless human lives by preventing bad vaccines from having negative side effects in the already suffering children. Animal testing saves lives and has led to the cure for many diseases, including polio, smallpox, tetanus, rabies, and many others. That's why this disease has been literally extinguished from the United States, and for that, we can thank the brave monkey.
Animal testing is not always bad. There are a lot of benefits too. For example, virtually every available medical treatment has to a degree involved animal testing. In 2011, 90% of biomed scientists agreed animal testing is essential. Animals often make better research subjects than human beings because of shorter life cycles, like mice. For example, in 1997, researchers were able to grow a human ear from implanted cow cartilage cells on the back of a living mouse to explore the possibility of fabricating body parts for plastic and reconstructive surgery. Nearly every medical breakthrough in the last 100 years has resulted directly from research using animals. Some examples include experiments where dogs had pancreases removed led directly to the discovery of insulin critical to solving diabetes. The polio vaccine tested on animals reduced global occurrence of disease from 350,000 in 1980 to 223 in 2012. Animal research also contributed to advances in understanding and treating conditions like breast cancer, brain injury, child leukemia, cystic fibrosis, malaria, tuberculosis, and many other things, as well help develop pacemakers and anesthetics. Director of Anderson's Cancer Center's Animal Research Facility states, "We wouldn't have hepatitis B vaccine without chimpanzees, and using chimpanzees is our best hope for finding hepatitis C vaccine, which kills 15,000 people in US every year."
Should I look at the camera? Dr. Michelle Haney, I'm an associate professor in the Department of Biology here at UCM.
Hello, Dr. Haney. How involved are you with our UCO Animal Research Facility?
We don't have an animal research facility per se, but I'm on the IACUC, which is the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, which governs research with vertebrate animals.
Do you know of any nearby facilities that you're majorly associated with?
I myself don't do a lot of research with animal testing. I do use vertebrate animals in my research, but they're all wild animals. I know OU has an animal testing facility, and Dr. Wei Chen works with them on the Health Science Center. Oklahoma State University probably has an animal research or animal housing facility, but again, I didn't do a lot of research with that when I was there.
So you say you work with wild vertebrate animals. Like, what type of animal specifically are you working with?
All my work, most of my work is with mammals. And so right now I have a project working on gophers. In the past I've worked on bats and lots of small rodents. And I had a student actually working on skunks at one point.
So what does most of this research entail? Like, what are you looking for specifically?
My research is population genetics and also what we call molecular systematics. So I'm interested in genetic diversity within and between species. In terms of the gopher project, we're trying to determine how many different species of gophers we have in Oklahoma. So we know of 2, and we know that they come into contact here in central Oklahoma, so we're trying to see where exactly they come into contact and if they form hybrids, and then we might have a 3rd species out in the panhandle that we're trying to identify. And I'm also interested in relationships between species from a taxonomic standpoint.
Okay. So most of your research is just actually behavior observation.
It's a genetic work, yeah.
And so what is your stance on the actual experimentation?
I think there is, to a certain extent, some need for it in terms of development of medicine. There are also, I know, lots of models, computer models, being developed. I don't know how well they simulate like a human system, but I think that's certainly an area where a lot of focus should go. I know from an IACUC standpoint, that committee that I'm on, we are all about minimizing pain. That's one of our major criterion. Is there something that you could do that doesn't cause the animal any pain, something that you could do that minimizes pain should you have to catch the animal and collect the animal in any way, manipulate the animal. And so from our standpoint, our goal is to minimize any sort of pain or certainly maximize humane usage of vertebrate animals.
Okay. So I know you didn't hear about the OU facility per se, but the main problem there seemed to be their living conditions. So you also look after that as well, along with the actual experimentation itself.
Right. If we were ever to have an animal housing facility here at UCO, the committee that I'm on, our job would be to make sure that the living standards were up to national, federal standards. There are federal standards for this, to make sure that those facilities are up to standard, to make sure that they have appropriate food, water, treatment, and again, as humanely as possible, use and work with those animals. So that would be part of our job if we ever had a facility like that here, and it would certainly follow federal guidelines, and it would be part of our accreditation. We would lose our ability to house animals if we didn't follow those rules.
Okay. So, what would your actual suggestion be in terms of what to experiment on versus what's usually used, such as chimps or apes of any sort, and mammals such as dogs?
Right. It honestly, I think, depends on the question that you're asking, and part of it is standards for that type of research. Again, that's not really the type of research that I do, but what are the standards? Can you make comparisons from previous studies? So oftentimes that might regulate what you can use. They're typically looking for a model system that closely mimics as much as possible a human system, because that's, as far as my understanding, typically what they're testing: reactions to drugs or reactions to certain conditions, which is oftentimes maybe why they use primates, because they're fairly similar. And so do those systems mimic as closely as possible what we would expect to see in humans?
Okay. With the advance in actual modeling technology we're having nowadays, there's becoming more three-dimensional modeling and such as that. Do you think we'll be able to see more use of actual models in simulations instead of actual animals eventually?
I think that's probably where the trend is going to go. I think there's been a push, especially from certain areas and certain groups, to see that trend. And certainly, just from a personal standpoint, I think if you can substitute a model for a living animal, then that would be beneficial. I think before that, those models completely replace animal models, they'll have to show that it would provide good, legitimate results. And I think that's probably where that lag is between the development of good 3D technology versus showing that technology translates to human applications.
Even though there are medical breakthroughs and some positive results, there are also negative outcomes. For example, over 100 million animals are burned, crippled, poisoned, and abused in U.S. labs every year. Also, 92% of experimental drugs that are safe and effective in animals fail in human clinical trials because they are too dangerous or don't work. Therefore, many cases do not correctly predict real-world human reactions. More than 115 million animals worldwide are used in lab experiments every year. Some tests involve killing pregnant animals and testing their fetuses. According to the Humane Society, registration at a single pesticide requires more than 50 experiments and the use of as many as 12,000 animals. 95% of animals used in experiments are not protected by Animal Welfare Act because it excludes birds, rats, mice, fish, and reptiles. After testing the animals, most facilities don't have anywhere to store the animals, so they are killed and discarded. For example, the OU campus has recently been shut down for practices like this with their baboons.
So this concludes our documentary. And as you can see, there are many different pros and cons to animal testing, making it a controversial issue. The pros play a role onto scientific discoveries, and the cons play more into the bioethical side of things. So the question becomes then, are the scientific benefits worth the harm caused to the animals? You decide.